Hey, well, listen, firstly, to hear about what National proposes to do to improve cancer treatment here in New Zealand. Before I begin, can I just acknowledge Sarah Nathan, who's the General Manager here of Southern Cross Gillies Ave Hospital, and just say, Sarah, thank you so much for letting us come and make this announcement here today and for the great work that you and your team do here in this fantastic facility. We appreciate you. I'm also joined by my colleagues, Dr. Shane Retty, our health spokesperson, and also Paul Goldsmith, and it's great to have you guys with us here as well. Now, each year, around 25,000 Kiwis are diagnosed with cancer, and 10,000 tragically lose their lives, making cancer our #1 killer here in New Zealand. And almost every New Zealander is likely to have had some experience with cancer in their lifetime, either personally or through a friend or through a family member or a colleague or a loved one. And these people are mums and dads and their grandparents and their brothers and sisters and their sons and daughters. And the battle with cancer isn't just fought by the person themselves with the diagnosis, it affects everyone who loves them and is fighting alongside them. New Zealand's healthcare professionals do an absolutely excellent job of caring for Kiwis with this terrible disease. But despite their efforts, cancer survival rates in New Zealand are not as high as they are in Australia or other developed countries. And healthcare experts suggest at least some of this difference in outcomes in access to modern care medicines. According to the New Zealand Cancer and are funded in Australia but not here in New Zealand. And so New Zealanders suffering from these cancers who have exhausted available treatments here in New Zealand currently face a really bleak choice. And that choice is either to give up, or it's to head up overseas, or to mortgage their home, or try and raise a significant amount of money from friends and family to fund the treatment themselves. And we want all cancer patients here in New Zealand to be armed with hope and positivity as they go through this battle against this terrible disease. Not helplessness, not frustration, and not desperation. National wants these New Zealanders to stay in New Zealand and to fight their cancer with the full support of a world-class health system. And every minute counts in the battle against cancer, and we want Kiwis to have access to better treatments here at home to give more of them the chance to beat cancer and to get back to their normal lives. And that's why today we're announcing that National will invest $280 million over 4 years to fund the 13 cancer treatments the New Zealand Cancer Control Agency says provide substantial clinical benefit that are funded in Australia but not here in New Zealand. So how are we going to fund these treatments? Well, recently the government announced a policy to remove the $5 fee for prescriptions for all patients at a cost of $620 million over 4 years. And it's National's view that there are so many health needs going unmet that an untargeted subsidy like that is going to people who frankly don't need it. People like myself or Chris Hipkins. It frankly isn't the best use of scarce health dollars. And that is why National will replace the untargeted subsidy with a very targeted one, making prescriptions free for low-income Kiwis using the Community Services card. Secondly, making it free for superannuitants and seniors using the Super Gold card. And for all others, the total amount that any family would pay for prescriptions in a year will be capped at $100. This change will reduce the cost of the prescription subsidy by about $316 million over 4 years. And the majority of those savings will be used, therefore, to fund access to the 13 cancer treatments, with the remaining savings remaining in the health budget. Prioritising funding for cancer treatments over untargeted prescription subsidies for those that can afford them shows what New Zealand can achieve when health funding is guided by health needs and common sense, not politics. National is committed to improving healthcare in New Zealand. We are going to increase health funding each and every year in government. We will restore explicit health targets, including for cancer treatment times. We will address the health workforce by training more nurses and more doctors. And National will deliver better health outcomes for our citizens. And today, having already announced an extension of breast cancer 9 to 74 years, saving up to 65 lives a year, today we commit to closing a number of cancer treatment gaps to New Zealand and Australia. Now, I want to tell first Dr. Shane run some more. Thank you, Shane.
We're interested in lifting the cancer bar. And clinicians have told us that they don't have the tools that they want or that they need to do that. clinicians have told us that 1,500 New Zealanders die a year for similar conditions where they might otherwise survive in Australia. We want to address that treatment gap. And if we can just look at that treatment gap for a moment, this was a treatment gap identified by the Cancer Control Agency in their document, in their report, Minding the Gap, or Understanding the Gap was their second report actually, this time last year. And they identified 20 treatment options with substantial clinical benefit. Australia funds and we do not. Now it was just for one class of tumours, what we call the solid tumours, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Of those 20, 2 they decided they'd never fund. 5 leaves the 13 that we're saying today, these treatment pairs that we would fund. I want to just give a shout out though to the non-solid cancer sufferers. That's the people with myeloma and leukemia. We have not forgotten you. We understand that you also have a chemotherapeutic need. But where we are here now is the Cancer Agency hasn't done a piece of work like they've done with solid tumours to be able to give us that guidance as to what those treatment gaps are. So again, we're sending out a signal to the people with myeloma and the people with leukemia. We understand, we haven't forgotten you, we just need that piece of work to be done by the Cancer Control Agency. We're very excited for this announcement. We want to work with clinicians, we want to raise the bar on what we do with cancer, and we think benchmarking ourselves to Australia, in this instance, first of all, is a very, very good starting place. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Well, as you can see, that's our approach to actually making sure we actually start to close the cancer gap versus Australia. And with that, happy to take any questions you may have.
Prescription fees have just been removed. You're going to be lumping them back on, which is going to be, an added cost, even though it was there previously. Is that the right approach?
What is the right approach is to say that people who can afford to pay for prescriptions should, and those that can't should be supported and subsidised in the way that we're talking about. And that's why we're being really clear to say for low-income people, for seniors and superannuitants, and also for families that actually have high needs, spending over $100 a year on prescriptions, 20 prescriptions a year, that will be fully subsidised and remain free. But for people like myself, or Chris Flanagan for that matter, to actually receive the benefit of those subsidies and actually to be able to take that money and to be able to invest it in actually these 13 cancer treatments that are not available, I think that is something that we can strongly justify, and I think the New Zealand people will understand.
Why do all seniors need the subsidy?
Because it's a commitment that we've made, understanding that they will have health needs that are, we're doing everything through the lens of health needs. And when you do it through the lens of health needs, I think common sense rather than politics, you get to a good place. And what we're saying is this is a better investment that actually people who can afford to pay and should pay the $5 prescription fees, we can take the aggregate amount of that money and actually invest that very strongly in actually upgrading the cancer treatments. And let's get real about it. New Zealand has a 15% higher mortality rate from cancer than Australia. And so that gap is real. And a lot of these treatments here are about extending life, but also, are life-saving. And so it's really important that we can actually access these drugs and give New Zealanders a better shot to actually close that cancer gap.
I get it's about health needs, but a lot of seniors probably could afford that prescription. So is there not a better targeted?
I think this is the cleanest way to be able to say, look, we can get to low-income users through the Community Services card, we can get to seniors through their Super Gold card, and we can say to all other New Zealanders, if you have needs of greater than $100 a year, 20 prescriptions a year, $100, they're free as well. I think that's a pretty good place for us to be in, but we're also acknowledging there is no justification, frankly, for giving people who can afford to pay a benefit that actually would sooner have that money actually doing another task for us. Let's be clear, health dollars are scarce and they need to be valued really deeply and they need to generate returns, and that's how we get better health outcomes. I'm not prepared to sit there and say New Zealanders will have a 15% higher mortality rate than their counterparts sitting in Australia, and this is a part of how we actually start to close that gap.
Mr. Luxon.
Yes, ma'am.
Non-solid tumours, why not fund drugs for them? And what about things like prostate cancer?
Yep, I'll let Shane talk to that.
Sure. And this is why I said to them they haven't been forgotten. The point of fact is the Cancer Agency hasn't done the same work for non-solid tumours as they have for solid. They haven't identified that, and that's specifically why I said to those cohort of people, we have not forgotten you. There's a piece of work out of our hands that needs to happen first. Prostate cancer, we do have plans to pursue that further. We're sort of exploring what that looks like from the next diagnosis step. If that involves MRIs, the reality is we don't have enough MRIs in New Zealand, so it's a wider infrastructure discussion. We're also mindful of the fact that there is few widely deployed national screening programs for prostate cancer around the world for very good reason. It's hard to find a really sensitive and specific screening tool, but we do have things that we're saying about that in our health discussions.
And what I've got here as well, do you think the government's doing enough within the mental health space?
Look, we're of a view that mental health is a really complex problem, really challenging, and that in our view probably this government has not done enough. When we look at the 1.9 billion that they were provided, we're all struggling, as is the person on the outcome that comes from that. Our commitment, as Chris has said many times, will be to establish a Minister for Mental Health, and MP Matt Ducey will be that Minister for clear commitment and urgency on our part for mental health.
What about paying nurses?
Do you want me to talk to that too? Sure. So we understand pay equity and we understand pay parity. In fact, if we look at the very first pay equity agreement, the Terra Nova Home Care and Support Workers, that came through in the 2017 National Government. So we understand that. What we don't know is if we're privileged to be in government and we lift up the hood, what's left? And so we won't offer what we can't deliver here now, other than to say we value our health workforce. We understand that probably one of the biggest factors around all of the health needs at the moment is health workforce. Health workforce. We value them. We're not in a position to make commitments. We're not privy to discussions that have been had, but we value them, and they'll see that in our policies and in our intent.
Do you have an indication on how many lives could potentially be saved by funding these 13 treatments?
Up to 1,000 people a year that will be benefiting. Obviously, some of these drugs and treatments are actually about life extending, and others are about life saving. And so it's a complex area, but essentially, there'll be up to 1,000 people benefit a year from these programs.
Deciding which drugs to fund, that's Pharmac's job. Should politicians be stepping in and telling them what they should and shouldn't fund?
Well, in this case, it's actually New Zealand Cancer Control Agency that has determined the 13 cancer treatments that actually are available in Australia that have substantial clinical benefits, and they have determined the lineup of these drugs here. From us, our point of view, Pharmac and their operation doesn't change at all. This is ring-fenced, incremental money that's coming in to support the drugs that the New Zealand Cancer Control Agency has identified that would have a substantial clinical benefit for New Zealanders that we don't currently have.
Did Labor swoop in and steal some of your thunder when it comes to education today?
Well, what I think is quite fascinating is that Labor has stolen our homework, because if you've worked out, we earlier in the year announced a policy called Teaching the Basics Brilliantly, which talked about an hour of maths, an hour of reading, an hour of writing, as to who gets taught what by when, and then also making sure we have good support for teachers and tax added to your weekly filling up your car bill, so that you go down in your car to buy your fruit and vegetables. The net is that you're $5 off worse. So it's not a good set of things. It's what we're seeing is a lot of frenetic behaviour from the Labor government. That's understandable. They haven't had any ideas. We've had 30 plus policies to deal with issues, to deal with how we rebuild our economy, how we deliver better health and education, and so it's very flattering that they've stolen our homework, but well ahead of them.
Yeah, but taking the politics out of it, is it not pleasing to see a bit of cross-party consensus that there is more work?
Oh, we're just very pleased that they think our ideas are so good they want to steal them. That's great, and the fact they haven't been able to come up with any of their own after 6 years in government is quite something, I think. And particularly when Chris Hipkins was the Education Minister for 5.5 years, spent $5 billion more, hired 1,400 more bureaucrats, delivered worse attendance and academic achievement. It's all a little bit too late, 54 days to go to an election.
Can Labor be trusted with the next generation of children?
Well, it's been very obvious. I mean, I don't know how you actually spend more, hire more bureaucrats and deliver worse outcomes. That is a very special and unique skill set that this government has. I could give anybody else more people, more money, and they'd deliver better outcomes. To think that we only have 10% of our kids today are not in school regularly. 75,000 are chronically absent from school. Half our kids arrive at high school not ready to go. Half our 15-year-olds failed the most basic writing test this year. And when I came through school and university, we were in the top 10 countries of the world on maths, reading and science. Well out of that now. So that is the legacy of a Labor government and a Chris Education Minister for 5.5 years of it, who actually spent more money, hired more bureaucrats and delivered worse outcomes.
So is that you're saying parents can't trust Labor when it comes
What they can trust is a national government that is actually going to deliver better health and education. Not only are we going to spend more money each and every year on health and on education, we're going to make sure we deliver outcomes and improve results for New Zealanders. That's what it's about. It's not just about how much money you spend, it's ultimately about what the results are that you're achieving.
While we are on the topic of education, the
Yeah.
Education Minister has called the policies as empty and thinks her plan is much better. What would you say to that?
Well, no disrespect. I'm not taking any lectures from Jan Tinetti as Education Minister under this government, a government that has presided over 40% of our kids not being at school regularly. As I said, half our 15-year-olds failing at most basic maths, reading and writing tests. So, this government's had 6 years. We are 54 days out from an election and nothing they say is credible or believable. You can talk tough on law and order 54 days out of it, but you actually had crime out of control. You can talk about how you're going to sort out education. You've had 6 years and it's got worse. You can talk about healthcare. You've just consolidated a whole bunch of bureaucracy and not delivered improved patient outcomes for New Zealanders. You can talk about the economy. You've spent 80% more in government spending and we haven't had an 80% improvement in education or health or crime or infrastructure eroding. So all of it is all too little too late, and it speaks of a government that's desperate, and frankly it's out of touch, it's out of ideas and it's out of time.
Listen, what's National's commitment to bidding and going for big events like the FIFA Women's World Cup in New Zealand?
Yeah, look, we're very up for that. I mean, what's interesting is the events that we have enjoyed over the last 6 years were actually put into pipeline and into play by previous national government. And it is important that we have a good pipeline of international events, that we can actually pick the event that we can genuinely deliver well and support. And we do need that pipeline to be built over coming years so that actually it develops our infrastructure, builds our sports, and actually builds tourism and attraction to New Zealand as well.
Are you intending
Sorry.
to reverse the government's changes to trust tax rates? And if so, what would you think those rates be?
Yeah, look, when I have a look at that, I mean, there is some thinking and theory that's normal that you would align trust rates with the highest marginal tax rate. We're just a bit sceptical of David Parker and where he's going, so we want to understand that more fully before we commit to that.
TV3's own Discovery has asked this government to pay relief for its transmission fees to Cordy. Does National have a view on whether 3 or the industry should be given relief in that way?
Well, look, it's a very large global media company that owns News Hub and TV3, and so that's not something that we would be entertaining at this point.
You said that anyone who wants to make bathrooms an election issues on another planet. So is David Siegel on another planet?
Look, I'm telling you, this election is not going to be about bathrooms. And if we want to have a conversation about bathrooms, we are not talking about the things that New Zealanders are caring about. And I'm telling you right now, when half of New Zealanders on a daily basis, when 430,000 parents that are actually skipping meals because they can't afford food, and families on good jobs economy, so we can deliver better public services and outcomes for New Zealanders, and that's what we're going to do.
So David Siegel is on another planet?
It's just not an issue that I think we should be talking about that is relevant to New Zealanders. I'm telling you, out there, New Zealanders are doing it incredibly tough. Inflation has stayed high for so long because of this government spending. Because inflation's high, we now have high interest rates. We are now the only country in the Asia Pacific region in a recession, an economic recession. That's serious stuff. And with that, after a recession, comes rising unemployment. So the economy is job number one. We care about the economy, not because it's about dollars and cents in economics, but because it actually is a thing that actually reduces pain and suffering for all New Zealanders. And that's what they need right now. Someone who can run this economy well, understands it, but can get it sorted, get it turned around so that they can actually get the better public services they deserve. All right.
Mr. Luxon,
yes, mate, sorry.
Last question. You mentioned these parents who are on good jobs, haven't got food banks, so I suppose they're not making as much money as yourself or Mr. Hipkins, but they're not making too little to make them eligible for community services cards. Why not extend food restrictions to that demographic?
Well, what we're going to do for what I call the squeeze middle is to give them income tax relief, and that is the cleanest, best way to be able to do that. We've been talking about that idea now for over 18 months. It's not a political or an ideological idea. It's very simply saying we're going to take the tax thresholds, inflation adjust them, and for average workers that would mean they would get $1,000 back in their pocket each If you have children and family, and with the early childhood education, our Family Boost package, there'd be $3,900 a year to be able to spend practical ways in which we let Kiwis keep more of their own money rather than giving it to Chris Hipkins and Grant Robertson to go off and waste and do dumb and stupid stuff as they have been doing with it. So part of it is giving them tax relief, and part of it is also making sure that we support those families when they get a cancer diagnosis as well, and we give them access to these drugs. Okay, thank you very much, team. Appreciate your time. Take care.